Radhe Radhe. Today is Saturday, 1st June 2024. Welcome to our Bhagavad Gita Study Sessions recap video, where we shall present to you a summary of the content covered today. As always, here with me is Mummy.
Radhe Radhe.
Bring up the screen and you'll see that we covered chapter 9, verses 9 and 10. Of course, prior to that was the recap quiz for revisiting material from last week, which was covering chapter 9, verses 6, 7, and 8. Please do take a look at the description for this video, where you'll get a link to the free portal where you can access the slides you're seeing in this video right now and the quiz questions that were covered in class. So that'll help everyone with their learning progress. So we'll go past all of those and now get into chapter 9, verse 9.
Na cha mam tani karmani nibhatnanti dhananjaya udasina vadasinam asaktam teshu karmasu.
So chapter 9, verse 9, the catchphrase for you to ponder about now and in later parts of your journey also is glue for God. Is there a glue for God is the question to think about. Because in this chapter 9, verse 9, Sri Krishna says that there is actually nothing that can bind him. He says to Arjun, as Mummy reminded us, O conqueror of wealth, Dhananjaya, an appellation, a name with a specific situation or purpose or context. Sri Krishna says to Arjun, none of these actions bind him, and he remains like a neutral observer, ever detached from these actions. In terms of the commentary, Swamiji, of course, reiterates to us how the material energy by itself is inert and insentient, doesn't have consciousness till it gets that inspiration or grace from God. We saw, of course, in class the example from the Ramayana. There's the example of, if you think of the chef and the tongs in the kitchen, only with that power can the tongs actually do things, lifting up red hot bowls, etc. And all that happens when God glances at the material energy to start that process of creation at the beginning of the next kalpadao, as we saw last time. But God being unaffected, his personality remaining intact, being a neutral observer, all that is because of this element of bliss, which comes from Hladini Shakti, his bliss-giving power, which we discussed at length in class as well. Some of you are at least familiar with the equivalent being Radharani. We also saw the term Atmaram, meaning he who rejoices in himself. No need for anything external. Internal bliss, potency, everything is just perfect and complete. Sri Krishna doesn't need anything else, which then, of course, Swamiji says takes us to the next verse about God being the non-doer and the supervisor. As a reminder, in the slide, we showed you that actually every week we are seeing this in the invocation opening prayer. Right here, Ladinim Shakti Rupinim. So you hear that every time Mummy sings it at the start of class. You all sing along in your minds and hearts. That is where now, Hladini Shakti, you can make that connection for that bliss-giving power. Likewise, we also showed that way back in the introduction at the very start, first 1 or 2 pages, that shloka is also given and Swamiji has explained. I offer my obeisance, my respectful obeisance to Radharani, the Supreme Goddess, and the bliss-giving power of God, Hladini Shakti. Other comment is chapter 3, verse 22. We connected it, reminded you that long ago, we had also seen 3 words beginning with Atma. So Atmaram, one who rejoices in the self, which again Swamiji has presented today in the commentary for chapter 9, verse 9. Back then in chapter 3, we also saw Atma Ruti and Atma Creed. So please go ahead and take a look at chapter 3, verse 22. With that, we return here to chapter 9, verse 9, and in fact, go ahead to chapter 9, verse 10.
Mayadhyakshena prakritihi suyate sacharacharam hetunanena kaunteya jagatvi parivartate.
So chapter 9, verse 10. Here the catchphrase is simply director and producer. Just like you have a film, for instance, you have a director and sometimes a same or sometimes a different producer. Here, of course, for everything in this world, the director and producer, of course, is God. The commentary is pretty short and quite self-explanatory, but before that, the translation, Sri Krishna says that it is all under his direction. So working under his direction, then different elements of the administration, as Swamiji often says, go about doing their tasks or work. So the material energy is the one that does the process of creation, which is bringing into being all animate and inanimate forms. Therefore, as the supervisor, as the producer in this sense, God, of course, all these elements of creation, maintenance, and dissolution take place. He's, of course, overall in charge, but it is these different departments or administrative functions that are carrying out all those various elements of work. So everything, again, under God's dominion, subordinate to his will, but of course, being done by different, even we have seen devtas. That's the earlier example Swamiji had given of the different administrations and departments. Again, everything is being sanctioned by the top here, which is God, but everyone is working under the jurisdiction of God, such as Brahma, the material energy, and so on. We saw back with the flyer connection as well, all of you in class at least, for the movie of all animate and inanimate forms, fill out the top line. So this was a request or an exercise. You saw the clapboard, and then the first line here is director for this movie of all animate and inanimate forms. Indeed, of course, that director, as well as the producer, is God. Mummy, I'll pass it over to you now to enlighten us on any additional content.
Thank you, Gagan. And we will first look at two important words, each from one verse. So verse number 9, let's see the word udasinavat. That means as neutral. So from this, we learn how Krishna is giving us this knowledge that how we can also remain unbound by karma. See, we are in this samsara and we are bound. Again and again, we have to come into this cycle of birth and death. But let's see, Krishna himself is saying that he remains like a neutral observer. It's just like a witness consciousness. Whatever is happening, just observe it and let it happen after putting your best effort, because we don't have control over the results of our actions. So we have to be always detached, not look for whatever our actions are going to bring. So there is a very important learning in this verse. And then, as we notice, there is an example in Mundak Upanishad, whereby it says how a silkworm, makes that cocoon and gets trapped himself in this. So similarly, while our thoughts becoming into actions, and then actions we getting attached to them, and then we get bound in karma, we have to learn how to remain as a neutral observer. Just as in a dream, we see everything, and when the dream is over, there is nothing. So similarly, things are happening and they will continue to happen. If we become a silent, neutral observer and not worry about the fruits of our actions, maybe we can slowly, by being on the path of spirituality, break away from this cycle. And how we have to learn how Krishna gives us that bliss. And he gets that bliss from Radharani because her devotion is of the top supreme level. So similarly, if we can also inculcate in ourselves that devotion for Radharani and Shri Krishna, that Radharani, who is the goddess of love, compassion, and devotion, And so she has this joy rendering power. If we can also from our small little actions give happiness to others, share bliss with others, and not worry about happiness and sorrow, whatever comes our way, always be surrendered to God and learn to be always joyful. Maybe with this baby steps, we can also break that cycle of life and death. And then let's move to verse number 10. In verse number 10, there is a very important word, Viparivartate. Viparivartate means undergoes the changes. Now, what are undergoes the changes? That God, he just glances at the primordial energy, and then everything becomes sentient, even the insentient things. Similarly, the way we have this example of when we see earth, the mud, when we see it as insentient, but when we put a seed in it and we put water, automatically the plants and trees start growing from that. So basically, we have to understand that God is only supervising the whole thing. There is non-doership. God says, I am not the doer. I just glance. So in our day-to-day lives, we have to apply it in our lives, how we do away with the concept of doership. I did this, I did that. So let's kill all that ego, that let's kill that I, and start be under the guidance of God and be under the Sharanagati of God, that I'm putting in my best effort, rest everything, it's up to God, whichever way the situation comes up or whichever way the whole thing works up, I'm going to accept it as prasad of God very happily and very joyfully. Over to you, Gagan.
Thank you, Mummy. And in fact, I'm going to encourage everyone, I'm going off memory, but to go and check chapter 2, verse 47. Very, very, of course, important, popular, oft-repeated verse. But there's a word there Swamiji has introduced us all to, Kartrit Vabhiman. So I'll remind everybody about that. Mummy has made an excellent connection through these two verses today about us getting that inspiration from God to also try to not be the sort of having that pride of being a doer, trying to be detached. So go ahead, take a look at chapter 2, verse 47, very lengthy commentary, but important word there. And of course, we'll make connections as we meet next time. Saturday, 8th June, 2024, 8 a.m. Central Time, 6:30 p.m. India time. Thank you so much. Radhe Radhe.
Radhe Radhe.